T-Rex finds baby Velociraptor crying. What follows is heartwarming. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The prehistoric jungle was alive with sound. In the thick, humid air, the cries of unseen creatures echoed through the towering ferns and twisted vines. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above, carrying the scent of fresh rain and damp earth. In the distance, a small stream gurgled over smooth stones, its waters glistening under the slanted rays of the morning sun. Through this vast, untamed wilderness moved a lone predator. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was a beast of legend, a towering colossus of muscle and instinct. Its massive frame shifted with each deliberate step, its clawed feet sinking slightly into the soft ground. Every movement was precise, every motion calculated. It was a hunter, an apex predator, feared by all who roamed these lands. And yet, something strange stopped it in its tracks. A sound, faint, high-pitched, and desperate. The T-Rex's amber eyes narrowed, its massive skull tilting slightly as it focused on the noise. It was not the screech of a pterosaur or the warning hiss of a snake. No, this was different. It was crying. The T-Rex inhaled deeply, its powerful nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. The scent was unfamiliar, small, vulnerable. Not the scent of something threatening, but of something alone. With slow, careful steps, the giant carnivore moved toward the sound. The jungle seemed to part before it, branches bending and snapping as its enormous body pushed through the undergrowth. Its heavy tail swayed behind it, leaving a deep groove in the earth. It moved without fear, knowing that nothing in this world dared challenge it. Then, as it pushed past a dense thicket, it saw the source of the cries. A baby velociraptor. The tiny creature was curled up at the base of a large tree, its small body trembling. Its feathers, damp from the morning mist, clung to its thin frame. Its wide, golden eyes darted around frantically, its tiny claws clutching at the loose dirt beneath it. The moment it saw the T-Rex, it froze. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The T-Rex loomed over the baby, its massive jaws parting slightly as it exhaled, its hot breath rustling the leaves around them. The baby raptor let out a pitiful chirp, shrinking further into itself, expecting the worst. Predator and prey. That was the way of the world. And yet, the T-Rex did not attack. Instead, it tilted its head, observing the tiny creature with something akin to curiosity. This was not the reaction of an animal about to devour its meal. This was something else. The baby raptor, realizing it had not been eaten yet, dared to lift its head slightly. Its small eyes searched the towering figure before it, as if trying to understand why it was still alive. The T-Rex let out a low rumble, deep and guttural, a sound that made the trees tremble. It was not a roar of aggression, but rather a question. "What are you doing here, little one?" The baby raptor, still shaking, took a hesitant step forward. Its tiny talons barely made a sound against the soft earth. The T-Rex remained still, watching. The baby chirped again, this time softer. It was alone, abandoned. Perhaps its family had been lost to a larger predator, or maybe it had simply wandered too far and could not find its way back. Whatever the reason, it had no one. Except now it had the T-Rex. The great predator lowered its massive head, its snout hovering just above the baby raptor. Could end this now with a single snap of its jaws. But instead, something remarkable happened. The T-Rex nudged the baby gently with its snout. A simple gesture, a moment of hesitation, and in that moment, everything changed. The baby let out a surprised chirp, its fear momentarily forgotten. It had expected pain, expected an ending, but instead, it felt warmth. The baby did something unexpected. It pressed itself against the T-Rex's snout, seeking comfort. The T-Rex blinked, its mind unable to fully comprehend what was happening. It had hunted for years, fought for survival, ruled these lands with strength and fear. But this was different. For reasons it did not understand, it did not want to leave this tiny creature alone. The baby raptor let out another soft chirp and, using its tiny claws, climbed up the T-Rex's massive forearm. It was slow, clumsy, but determined. It found a perch on the beast's back, gripping onto the rough skin as if it had done this 1,000 times before. The T-Rex remained still, feeling the small weight on its back. It should have shaken it off, should have continued on its path. But it didn't. Instead, with the baby raptor clinging to it, the T-Rex turned and began to walk. For the first time in its life, it was not walking alone. A new journey begins. The jungle stretched before them, the towering trees casting dappled shadows on the ground. The T-Rex moved with its usual confidence, but its pace was slower, more measured. The baby raptor, still perched on its back, let out soft chirps every now and then, as if speaking to its unlikely guardian. The T-Rex did not understand the sounds, but it listened. They traveled together, side by side. Two creatures that should have been enemies, now something else entirely. As the sun climbed higher, hunger gnawed at the T-Rex's belly. It had not eaten since the night before, and the instinct to hunt stirred within it. But as it prepared to move toward a clearing where smaller dinosaurs often gathered, it felt the baby raptor shift on its back. The tiny creature chirped, nudging the T-Rex's skin. It was hungry too. The T-Rex paused, considering. Normally, it would hunt for itself. But now, for the first time, it had another to think about. It lowered its massive head, scanning the ground. A small movement caught its eye, a lizard scurrying through the underbrush. With a swift movement, the T-Rex brought its clawed foot down, trapping the creature beneath it. It then carefully nudged it toward the baby raptor, who sniffed at it hesitantly before grabbing it in its tiny jaws. The baby chirped in delight as it ate, its tail flicking happily. The T-Rex watched. Something deep within the giant predator stirred, a feeling it had never known: protection. As the jungle stretched endlessly before them, the T-Rex knew one thing: it would not let anything harm this little one, not while it still drew breath. The jungle carried on around them, oblivious to the unlikely duo that now traveled together. The towering T-Rex, king of the prehistoric world, moved with measured steps, adjusting its powerful stride to account for the tiny baby Velociraptor clinging to its back. The baby had long finished the small lizard the T-Rex had given it, and now it rested, nestled comfortably between the ridges of the massive dinosaur's spine. Occasionally, it chirped soft, inquisitive sounds that seemed to ask endless questions. The T-Rex did not respond, but it listened. As the pair moved through the dense foliage, the baby raptor gradually relaxed, its sharp little claws gripping less tightly. It no longer flinched at the rustling sounds of unseen creatures or the distant roars of other predators. It had learned something important. As long as it stayed with the T-Rex, nothing could harm it. But the jungle was unpredictable, and danger was never far. A strange stillness settled over the forest. The usual chorus of insects and distant calls of smaller dinosaurs had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The T-Rex paused mid-step, nostrils flaring. Something wasn't right. The baby raptor sensed it too. It lifted its head, its tiny body tensing, claws digging slightly into the T-Rex's rough skin. Its golden eyes darted nervously around, its chirps quiet and uncertain. The T-Rex let out a low growl, a warning. Then, from the underbrush, they appeared. Pack of velociraptors. There were 4 of them, their slender forms weaving through the shadows like ghosts. Their sickle-shaped claws gleamed in the filtered sunlight as they moved with calculated precision, encircling the massive T-Rex. The baby raptor trembled, pressing itself lower against its guardian's back. The T-Rex turned its massive head, its piercing amber eyes locking onto the pack leader, a sleek, dark-feathered raptor with scars running along its snout. The alpha let out a sharp, commanding hiss, and the others flared their feathers, their eyes locked on the baby. They weren't here to fight the T-Rex. They were here for the baby. Was this the baby's lost family? Or were they opportunistic scavengers, looking to reclaim a young one they had abandoned? The T-Rex didn't care. The baby was his now. The lead raptor stepped forward, clicking its teeth together in a series of rapid, deliberate sounds. The rest of the pack followed, their movements careful but confident. They were testing the T-Rex's reaction, seeing if they could claim the baby without a fight. The T-Rex let out a warning snarl, baring its massive teeth. The deep rumble of its growl made the very ground tremble. The message was clear: come any closer and you will regret it. The raptors hesitated, but they did not retreat. The alpha raptor made a sudden lunge, not toward the T-Rex, but toward the tree beside it, leaping onto the low branches and perching there like a predator lying in wait. It let out a sharp bark, its piercing gaze locked onto the baby. The baby let out a panicked chirp, pressing itself even closer to the T-Rex's warm hide. It didn't recognize these raptors. It didn't want to go with them. The T-Rex sensed the fear in the baby's trembling form. That was all it needed to know. With a powerful, earth-shaking roar, the T-Rex lunged forward, snapping its massive jaws toward the alpha raptor. The raptor leaped back just in time, barely avoiding the crushing force of those bone-breaking teeth. It landed gracefully, letting out an angry hiss. The other raptors faltered, glancing at one another, uncertain. The T-Rex advanced. The alpha raptor let out another series of barks, but the T-Rex wasn't listening. It was no longer warning them, it was chasing them off. The pack hesitated for only a second longer before finally making their decision. They turned and vanished into the jungle, their sleek bodies disappearing between the trees like whispers in the wind. Silence returned. The T-Rex stood motionless, watching the last flicker of movement in the undergrowth before it was gone. Then slowly it relaxed. A soft, hesitant chirp broke the silence. The baby raptor was still clinging to its back, but it was no longer trembling. Instead, it was looking up at its protector with wide, grateful eyes. The T-Rex let out a deep rumble. Not a roar this time, but something gentler, almost reassuring. For the first time, the baby understood. It had not been abandoned again. It was safe. It was home. Days passed, and what had once been an odd, temporary companionship grew into something unbreakable. The baby raptor became more confident, bolder, as it learned from its guardian. It followed the T-Rex everywhere, mimicking its movements, copying its hunting techniques. It even tried to let out tiny roars, though they always came out as high-pitched chirps that made the T-Rex rumble with amusement. The T-Rex, for its part, adapted to having a constant companion. It no longer traveled alone. It hunted for two, slept with another body nestled against its warm hide, and when it moved through the jungle, it was always aware of the small creature following at its heels. And it protected. Always. One afternoon, as the T-Rex led the way toward a riverbank, the baby raptor suddenly scrambled onto its guardian's back, perching between its shoulders like a rider on a mighty beast. The T-Rex paused, glancing back at the tiny passenger. The baby chirped, tail flicking playfully. The T-Rex shook its head, exhaling in amusement, but it allowed it. And together they continued their journey. Side by side, a family not by blood, but by choice. A family that would never be alone again. The days turned into weeks, and the bond between the T-Rex and the baby Velociraptor only grew stronger. What had started as an instinctive act of protection had transformed into something neither of them could fully understand, yet both embraced without question. They had become a pair, an unbreakable force in a world ruled by survival and instinct. The baby raptor no longer hesitated in following the T-Rex's every movement. It moved through the jungle with confidence, darting through the underbrush while the massive predator walked with slow, deliberate steps. The contrast between them was almost comical, the towering giant and the small, feathered shadow that never strayed far from its protector's side. The T-Rex, despite its usual solitary nature, had adapted to this new dynamic. It had once been a hunter that feared nothing, a creature that relied solely on its strength and size to dominate its surroundings. But now it was something else entirely. It was a guardian, a caretaker, a protector. And with each passing day, the baby raptor reinforced that role, trusting the T-Rex completely. One morning, as the jungle began to stir with life, the baby raptor decided to test the boundaries of its bravery. They had stopped near a watering hole, the T-Rex watching from a shaded clearing as the baby ventured to the water's edge. The surface rippled as tiny creatures skittered across it, while a few smaller dinosaurs cautiously drank from the opposite bank. The baby raptor chirped excitedly, dipping its head down to take its own sip. But as it did, a sudden splash broke the stillness, sending a small wave rolling toward the shore. The baby flinched, leaping backward as a pair of reptilian eyes emerged from beneath the surface. A prehistoric crocodile, its sleek body half hidden beneath the murky water. The predator moved fast, lunging toward the shore with jaws wide open, aiming straight for the baby raptor. But the attack never connected. A thunderous roar shattered the air, shaking the very trees around them. The T-Rex had already reacted, its massive body moving with terrifying speed. In an instant, it was there, between the baby and the water, its massive tail swinging with devastating force. The impact sent the crocodile hurtling back into the water, splashing wildly before it disappeared beneath the surface. The jungle fell silent. The baby raptor, still trembling, looked up at the T-Rex with wide eyes. It had felt fear, real fear, for the first time since being abandoned. But as it stood beneath the towering form of its protector, that fear faded. The T-Rex lowered its head, exhaling deeply as if checking to make sure the baby was unharmed. The baby let out a small chirp, pressing its tiny body against the T-Rex's leg. The T-Rex let out a soft response, something deep and comforting. It would never let anything harm the little one. From that day forward, the baby raptor rarely left the T-Rex's side. It climbed onto its guardian's back whenever they moved through unfamiliar territory, perching safely between the ridges of its spine. It still darted off on occasion, chasing after insects or investigating strange noises, but it always returned quickly, never wanting to be too far away. The T-Rex learned patience in a way it never had before. It slowed its stride when the baby wanted to explore. It let the tiny creature climb over its tail and even gnaw playfully on its toes. The predator that once ruled the jungle with raw power now allowed itself to be used as a living jungle gym. As the sun began to set one evening, they reached a clearing on the edge of a rocky plateau. The view stretched for miles, an endless sea of green with mountains in the distance. The T-Rex lowered itself onto the ground, its body sinking slightly into the warm earth. The baby raptor climbed onto its back, letting out a satisfied chirp as it nestled between the ridges. The night sounds of the jungle filled the air, distant calls of creatures unknown, the rustling of wind through the trees. The stars began to appear, speckling the sky with tiny glimmers of light. The baby raptor let out a soft noise, almost like a sigh. It curled up tightly, its tiny form barely noticeable against the T-Rex's massive frame. The T-Rex remained still, its keen eyes scanning the darkness, always watchful, always aware. Sleep came slowly, but it came, and for the first time in a long time, both creatures rested without fear. The next day, the jungle greeted them with new challenges. A herd of Triceratops had moved through the area, their heavy footsteps leaving deep impressions in the soil. The T-Rex and the baby watched from a distance as the herd grazed, their frills flaring occasionally in warning whenever another creature came too close. The baby raptor chirped excitedly, its tiny claws gripping onto the T-Rex's leg. It had never seen creatures like this up close before, and its curiosity got the better of it. The T-Rex rumbled in warning, nudging the baby back slightly. The Triceratops were not predators, but they were dangerous all the same. Their horns were sharp, their strength unmatched. A single charge could be devastating. But before the T-Rex could move them away from the area, one of the younger Triceratops noticed them. The juvenile, still smaller than the towering adults but strong in its own right, let out a challenging snort. It stomped its foot, tossing its head in defiance. It was testing them, trying to see if they were a threat. The T-Rex remained motionless. It had no interest in a fight, but the baby raptor had other ideas. Letting out a high-pitched chirp, the baby suddenly darted forward, flapping its tiny feathered arms as it let out what was clearly meant to be an intimidating challenge. The Triceratops calf tilted its head, confused. It took a few steps closer, sniffing at the tiny creature that had dared to face it. The baby raptor, undeterred, hopped forward again, this time letting out an even louder chirp. The T-Rex watched, its tail swaying slightly in amusement. The young Triceratops, deciding that the tiny raptor was not a threat, snorted and turned back toward its herd. The baby raptor let out a victorious squeak, puffing up as if it had won some great battle. The T-Rex rumbled in amusement, nudging the baby with its snout. The tiny raptor clambered back onto its back, clearly proud of itself. As they moved on, the jungle once again stretched before them, filled with unknown dangers and untold adventures. But no matter what lay ahead, one thing was certain. They would face it together. The T-Rex, once the solitary ruler of this land, now walked with purpose beyond itself. It had found something worth protecting. And in turn, the baby raptor had found a guardian, a parent, and a home. They had defied nature. They had rewritten the rules of predator and prey. And they had forged a bond stronger than blood. As the sun began to set once more, casting golden hues across the sky, the baby raptor curled up against the T-Rex's side, safe and warm. The T-Rex closed its eyes, its massive body rising and falling with each steady breath. Together, they had found something neither of them had expected. Family. The days continued to pass, and the bond between the T-Rex and the baby Velociraptor only grew stronger. They had become inseparable, their connection deepening beyond the instinctual roles of predator and prey. The jungle, vast and untamed, was no longer just a place of survival for them. It had become their home, a world they navigated together, side by side. The baby raptor had grown bolder, more adventurous. No longer did it cling so tightly to the T-Rex's back, though it still often rode there when it grew tired or when the jungle seemed too overwhelming. It had learned to dart ahead, sniffing at strange plants, chasing after buzzing insects, and mimicking the sounds of the jungle's many creatures. It was becoming more independent, though never straying far from the safety of its guardian. The T-Rex, for its part, had changed in ways it could never have anticipated. Where once it had been a solitary hunter, ruled only by instinct and hunger, it now found itself waiting when the baby lagged behind, nudging it gently when it hesitated, and even adjusting its pace to accommodate the tiny creature's curiosity. It had become more than just a protector, it had become a guide, a teacher. One afternoon, as they walked along a ridge overlooking a vast valley, the baby raptor suddenly perked up, its head tilted, nostrils flaring as it caught an unfamiliar scent on the wind. It let out a questioning chirp, looking up at the T-Rex. The T-Rex stopped, its own senses sharpening. Two had detected something, a scent it had not encountered in a long time. Smoke. The baby raptor chirped again, sniffing the air more eagerly. It had never smelled smoke before, and though it did not yet understand what it meant, it could sense that something was different. The T-Rex, however, understood immediately. Fire. The great predator let out a low rumble, its muscles tensing as it turned toward the distant horizon. Far off in the valley below, a dark plume of smoke was rising into the sky, twisting like a serpent against the backdrop of the setting sun. Fire was rare in this jungle, but when it came with fury, and it spared nothing in its path. The baby raptor let out a small, uncertain chirp. It could feel the change in the T-Rex's posture, the way its guardian's body had gone rigid, the way its golden eyes were fixed intently on the distant blaze. The jungle, once filled with the constant hum of life, had gone eerily silent. The T-Rex did not hesitate. It turned, nudging the baby raptor with its snout, urging it to climb onto its back. The baby obeyed without question, its tiny claws gripping tightly as the T-Rex began to move. Fast. The jungle blurred past them as they descended from the ridge, weaving between ancient trees and crashing through dense underbrush. The baby raptor clung to its guardian, feeling the raw power of the T-Rex's strides as they surged forward. The great predator's instincts had taken over, not to hunt, not to fight, but to flee. The fire had begun to spread. The wind carried the scent of burning vegetation, and the distant crackling of flames grew louder with every passing moment. The T-Rex could hear it now, the snapping of branches, the distant cries of animals caught in its path. As they raced through the jungle, a sudden movement caught the baby raptor's eye. It let out an urgent chirp, tapping its claws against the T-Rex's back. The T-Rex growled, skidding to a halt. Ahead of them, in a small clearing, a young ankylosaurus lay trapped beneath a fallen tree. It thrashed weakly, its armored body heaving with exhaustion. The fire had not yet reached this part of the jungle, but the fear in its eyes was unmistakable. It knew what was coming. The T-Rex exhaled sharply. This was not its problem. This was not their problem. They had to move. The fire would not wait. But then the baby raptor chirped, a desperate, pleading sound. It squirmed against the T-Rex's back, trying to climb down. It wanted to help. The T-Rex hesitated. The fire was coming. They could leave now and escape without trouble. But the baby raptor, the tiny creature it had chosen to protect, was looking up at it with expectant eyes. It wanted to save this creature, and the T-Rex could not ignore it. With a thunderous step, the great predator moved forward. The ankylosaurus let out a weak cry as the T-Rex's shadow fell over it. It tried to move to defend itself, but it was too weak. The T-Rex studied the fallen tree. It was thick, its heavy branches tangled in the earth. But it was not immovable. Planting its massive feet firmly into the ground, the T-Rex lowered its powerful head and shoved. The earth trembled as the tree groaned in protest. The baby raptor jumped down, chirping excitedly, hopping around the trapped ankylosaurus as if cheering the T-Rex on. With one final push, the tree rolled to the side, crashing into the underbrush. The ankylosaurus let out a startled grunt as it scrambled to its feet, shaking the dirt from its thick hide. It stood still for a moment, as if uncertain of what had just happened. The baby raptor chirped at it, nudging its armored side as if to say, "Go, run." The ankylosaurus hesitated, then let out a short, low rumble, something almost like gratitude, before turning and lumbering off into the jungle. The baby raptor let out an excited chirp, its tiny body practically vibrating with pride. It looked up at the T-Rex, eyes shining. The T-Rex rumbled in response. They did not have time to celebrate. The fire was closer now, its orange glow flickering through the trees, the heat licking at the air. The T-Rex lowered its head, and the baby raptor scrambled back onto its guardian's back. They ran. The jungle blurred past them once more, the shadows of the fire dancing in the corners of their vision. The world was alive with movement, creatures big and small fleeing in all directions, the very air thick with the scent of smoke. But the T-Rex did not stop. It would not stop. And then suddenly the jungle opened. They burst into a clearing, the sky vast and open above them, the fire still raging behind. The T-Rex slowed, its powerful legs finally coming to a halt. Its massive chest heaved with exhaustion, the baby raptor still gripping tightly to its back. They had made it. The jungle behind them crackled and roared as the fire continued its rampage. But here, in this open space, they were safe. The baby raptor let go of its tight grip, sliding down from the T-Rex's back and onto the cool grass below. It chirped, nudging its guardian's massive foot. The T-Rex lowered its head, exhaling a deep, steady breath. It had done what it never thought possible. It had chosen to protect not just itself, but another. And now, standing here in the aftermath, it knew one thing for certain. This tiny raptor, this little creature that had once been nothing more than a trembling scrap of feathers and bone, was worth everything. The baby raptor, oblivious to the weight of the moment, let out a small yawn before curling up in the grass, its tail twitching as it nuzzled into the T-Rex's side. The T-Rex watched it for a long moment. Then, slowly, it lowered itself onto the ground, its massive frame settling beside its tiny companion. The fire in the jungle burned on. But here, in this clearing, under the watchful glow of the stars, the bond between them burned brighter. And nothing, not fire, not predators, not time itself, would ever break it. The night stretched on, the distant glow of the fire still flickering beyond the jungle's edge. The once vibrant undergrowth now lay in charred ruin, smoke rising in ghostly wisps toward the sky. But here, in the safety of the clearing, the T-Rex and the baby Velociraptor found respite beneath the pale glow of the moon. The T-Rex lay stretched out, its massive body partially curled around the baby, shielding it from the cool night breeze. The baby raptor had long since drifted into sleep, its tiny chest rising and falling with each steady breath. The great predator watched over it, its keen eyes reflecting the fire's fading embers in the distance. For the first time in its long, solitary life, the T-Rex felt something beyond survival. It felt purpose. It had always known hunger, battle, and the relentless pursuit of dominance. But now, as it looked down at the fragile creature curled against its side, it realized that protection was something entirely different. A sudden rustling in the nearby underbrush snapped the T-Rex's focus. Instinctively, it lifted its massive head, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of something unfamiliar. The baby raptor stirred slightly but did not wake. The T-Rex remained still, its powerful muscles coiled like steel, ready to react at the first sign of danger. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by the soft padding of feet. The T-Rex let out a low, warning growl, the deep rumble reverberating through the clearing. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a young Allosaurus. It was smaller than the T-Rex, but still a formidable predator in its own right. Its slender frame was built for speed, its amber eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and caution. It stopped a few feet away, tilting its head as it studied the massive dinosaur before it. The T-Rex did not move, its gaze locked onto the intruder. The baby raptor, sensing the tension, stirred awake, its small claws gripping the T-Rex's hide as it let out a sleepy chirp. It blinked, confused at the sight of the newcomer. The Allosaurus made no move to attack. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, a non-threatening gesture, one that spoke of understanding. It too had been drawn here, perhaps escaping the fire, perhaps searching for something it had lost. The baby raptor let out a small, hesitant chirp. The Allosaurus blinked, its gaze flickering between the tiny raptor and the T-Rex. Then, after a long pause, it took a cautious step closer. The T-Rex rumbled but did not strike. It did not sense aggression in the Allosaurus, only loneliness. The young predator kept its movements slow, careful, as if waiting for permission to enter this strange new dynamic. The baby raptor, now fully awake, perked up with curiosity. It chirped again, this time hopping down from the T-Rex's back and approaching the Allosaurus with small, tentative steps. The Allosaurus did not move, allowing the baby to come closer. The baby raptor tilted its head, eyes scanning the young predator in front of it. Then, in a completely unexpected gesture, it bumped its snout against the Allosaurus's leg. A greeting, a silent acknowledgement. The Allosaurus let out a soft, almost hesitant grunt. It had not expected kindness. It had not expected acceptance. The T-Rex watched, its instincts warring with something deeper. It had never tolerated competition, never allowed another predator so close without challenge. But here, now, as the baby raptor nuzzled the Allosaurus in quiet curiosity, something within the great beast shifted. It rumbled softly, not a warning, but something else, a signal, an acceptance. The Allosaurus hesitated for only a moment longer before settling into a crouch, its body relaxing. The baby raptor chirped happily and, as if it had already made up its mind, curled up between its two new companions. The T-Rex exhaled, lowering its massive head back to the ground. The Allosaurus remained watchful for a moment longer before finally resting its own head against the soft earth. The fire was gone. The jungle was quiet once more. And now, under the vast night sky, three creatures that should have been enemies slept together as one. Dawn arrived with the first golden rays spilling over the treetops, casting long shadows through the clearing. The jungle, though still bearing the scars of the fire, had already begun its slow renewal. The T-Rex stirred first, its massive body shifting as it rose to its feet. The baby raptor, still nestled between them, let out a soft chirp, blinking sleepily. The Allosaurus stretched, shaking loose bits of dirt from its sleek hide before standing as well. They stood together, the morning breeze rustling the leaves around them. The T-Rex looked at the baby raptor, then at the Allosaurus. Once it had been alone, a ruler of the jungle, feared and unmatched. But now it had something it had never thought possible. Family. The baby raptor hopped onto the T-Rex's foot, then clambered up its leg, finally settling into its usual perch atop its guardian's back. The T-Rex let out a deep exhale, feeling the familiar weight of the tiny creature nestled between its spines. The Allosaurus hesitated for a moment, glancing back toward the jungle, toward the vast, untamed world beyond. It had no reason to stay, no obligation to remain with them. But then the baby raptor chirped, looking at it expectantly, inviting it. The Allosaurus met the T-Rex's gaze. The great predator did not snarl, did not chase it away. Instead, it simply turned and began to walk. The Allosaurus hesitated no longer. With quick, confident steps, it followed. And so, three creatures that should have been enemies instead became something far greater. They walked together through the jungle, not as solitary hunters, but as something new, something that defied instinct, something that nature had never intended. They were a pack, family, and together no force in the world, not fire, not hunger, not even time itself, could ever tear them apart. The jungle stretched endlessly before them, a world of towering trees, tangled vines, and hidden dangers lurking in the shadows. But the three unlikely companions moved forward as one, their bond defying the natural order of predator and prey. The T-Rex, the baby Velociraptor, and the young Allosaurus had become something no creature before them had dared to be. A family forged not by blood, but by choice. The baby raptor, perched atop the T-Rex's back, let out a happy chirp as the morning sun warmed its tiny body. It stretched its feathered arms, flapping playfully before nuzzling into the rough skin of its guardian's spine. The T-Rex rumbled in response, a low, deep sound that vibrated through the air. It had never imagined itself as a caretaker, as anything other than a hunter, a king among beasts. But now, with the tiny raptor nestled against its back, it felt something more. The Allosaurus walked beside them, its sleek body moving with calculated precision. It was still adjusting to this strange new reality, still unsure where it fit in this unorthodox trio. It had spent its life alone, relying only on itself to survive. But now something had changed. The baby raptor, so full of life and curiosity, had accepted it without hesitation. And the T-Rex, once a creature it would have feared, had not only tolerated its presence but allowed it to stay. They moved in harmony, weaving through the jungle, their senses always alert. The jungle was alive with noise, distant roars, the rustling of unseen creatures, the occasional crack of a fallen branch. But there was no fear between them, only understanding. The baby raptor, restless as always, suddenly leapt from the T-Rex's back, landing gracefully on the ground. It chirped excitedly, its tail flicking as it darted toward a cluster of tall ferns. The T-Rex and the Allosaurus watched as the tiny creature vanished into the foliage, its small form disappearing between the leaves. The Allosaurus let out a low grunt, tilting its head. The T-Rex remained still, nostrils flaring as it listened. The baby had a habit of wandering off, but it always came back. Seconds passed, then minutes. The T-Rex let out a low rumble, a call, a sound that carried through the jungle, a reminder that it was waiting. No response. The Allosaurus took a step forward, nostrils twitching. Could smell the baby raptor's scent, but something else, too. Something different. A sudden chirp rang out, sharp and distressed. The T-Rex moved instantly. Its massive form crashed through the jungle, trees and vines snapping like twigs beneath its powerful strides. The Allosaurus followed closely, weaving through the gaps in the dense undergrowth, its speed allowing it to keep pace. The baby's scent was close, too close. Then they saw it. The baby raptor was backed against the trunk of a fallen tree, its small body trembling. Its golden eyes were wide with fear, its tiny claws digging into the bark. and standing before it was a megaraptor. Larger than the Allosaurus, sleeker than the T-Rex, the megaraptor was built for speed and precision. Its long, clawed arms twitched as it sized up its tiny prey. It had likely been hunting when it stumbled upon the baby raptor. An easy meal, defenseless and alone. But the baby was not alone. The T-Rex erupted into the clearing with an earth-shaking roar, its massive form casting a shadow over the entire scene. The megaraptor barely had time to react before the Allosaurus lunged, jaws snapping just inches from its throat. The megaraptor shrieked in surprise, its body twisting as it barely evaded the attack. It had expected an easy kill, not a fight. The T-Rex did not wait. Charged. The ground trembled beneath its weight as it surged forward, its powerful tail sweeping through the air like a battering ram. The megaraptor tried to move, but the Allosaurus was already cutting off its escape route, circling around like a wolf hunting with its pack. The baby raptor scrambled onto the fallen tree, its tiny claws gripping the bark as it watched the battle unfold. It had seen its protector fight before, but never like this. Never with such fury. The megaraptor hissed, its claws slicing through the air as it lunged at the T-Rex's leg, aiming for the tendons. But the great predator was faster. It twisted its massive body, dodging the attack with surprising agility. And then, it struck. With one devastating swing of its head, the T-Rex's skull collided with the megaraptor's side, sending the predator crashing into the ground. Dust exploded into the air as the megaraptor let out a shriek of pain, its ribs crushed beneath the force of the blow. Tried to move, tried to scramble to its feet, but the Allosaurus was already there. Fangs flashed, claws raked, and then silence. The jungle, so full of noise just moments before, fell eerily still. The megaraptor lay unmoving, its body sprawled in the dirt, its amber eyes glazed over in the fading light. The baby raptor let out a small chirp, uncertain, cautious. The T-Rex took a deep breath, exhaling sharply as it turned toward its tiny companion. The battle was over. The baby raptor hesitated only for a moment before bounding toward its guardian, its tiny feet kicking up dust as it ran. It leapt onto the T-Rex's foot, climbing up its leg, scrambling onto its back like it always did. The T-Rex rumbled, the sound deep and reassuring. The Allosaurus, standing just beside them, let out a soft growl of its own. Not a warning, not a challenge, an acknowledgement. They had fought together. They had won together. They were together. The T-Rex turned, leading them away from the clearing, away from the megaraptor's fallen form. There was no need to linger. They had nothing left to prove. As they walked, the baby raptor curled up against the T-Rex's back, exhausted but safe. The Allosaurus walked close beside them, no longer trailing behind, no longer hesitant. They moved as one. Through the jungle, through the unknown, through whatever dangers awaited them. They were not just predators, not just survivors. They were a family, and nothing, not fire, not fear, not even death itself, would ever change that.